22 million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. Any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse. You're the one who has that power. You and I have never seen democracy. All we've seen is hypocrisy. When we open our eyes today and look around America, we see America not through the eyes of someone who has enjoyed the fruits of Americanism. We see America through the eyes of someone who has been the victim of Americanism. We don't see any American dream. We've experienced only the American nightmare. We haven't benefited from America's democracy. We've only suffered from America's hypocrisy. And the generation that's coming up now can see it and are not afraid to say it. 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 And are not afraid to say it.
And are not afraid to say it. Welcome, welcome, welcome. You are tuned into Black Westchester Presents, the People Before Politics radio show, episode 302. We're on every Sunday 6 to 8, streaming live on Facebook and YouTube these days. Shout out to DJ Cruz and the In the Mix crew where we started out. I tell you what, days like this where it is hot, I miss the studio. There definitely was a lot of stuff going on there. I am joined with my co-host, Dr. Bob, Robert Baskerville.
Stop there.
Brooklyn Bob. There you go. The Brooklyn Bob. Brooklyn. Now, so for those who may have seen the promotion up before the show, we have on New York City mayoral candidate Shaun Donavon. He'll be the second of the New York City mayoral candidates we'll be interviewing. He'll be on at 7. We had if you missed it, we had Eric Adams was still trying to lock down Maya Wiley and a few others real quick before the primary. I see that as most of you know, I received a journalism fellowship from the Craig Newmark Graduate Journalism School of the Graduate School of Journalism at CUNY, and it was a paid fellowship, and it required me to do several interview articles on the New York City race, and they gave you a lot of resources, and you got to watch the debates, and ask questions. And Shaun Donavon was actually the first candidate of all the candidates that said, "Send me your information, and we'll put you on the mailing list." Like before he was off the screen, his people, Jeremy, shout out to Jeremy, they made sure we were on the mailing list. They've been trying to get on the show for the last couple of months. We've been doing a lot of local stuff, so we're finally just getting to that, and that will be at 7 p.m. today. Again, if you missed the Eric Adams interview, check it out. And for those, because we're going to send it out to all the candidates, definitely still trying to lock down Maya Wiley and one or two of the other candidates. So if any of the candidates are watching this for the Shaun Donavon interview, hit us at blackwestchester@gmail.com. That's the one from your campaign. Hit us, and we will definitely try to get you in before the June 22nd primary. So I just came back off vacation like literally hours ago. Last week's show I actually did from an undisclosed location on vacation at my personal little resort. Everybody who knows me knows where that is. And We did the show last week. I had to get away when I haven't been. It's been about a year, and it was silly season is upon us, and it's important if nothing else. Peace of mind. You do this stuff every day, and you got these calls coming in every day, and you're dealing with all the nonsense every day that comes with it. You need your break. So I took a much needed break, and rest assured, after the primary, I'm leaving again for another week. So anyway, I just got back, so I'm playing catch up on some of the issues that are going on in the city. Thank you, Stephanie. She said last week was a good show. Yes, we had the PBA president, the Mount Vernon PBA president on, and the guest co-host, Dr. Damon Brown, and a law enforcement expert. And we continued on the senseless gun violence conversation, but we heard from the police side of it. You know what I'm saying? Some of the challenges they face. So we've been addressing it from every angle. And then we talked about a lot of other things that was facing the Mount Vernon Police Department. So if you missed last week's show 301, definitely go to blackwestchester.com, and it should be on the front page. If not, just click on the radio tab, click on People Before Politics. And if you click on the radio tab, actually, it should be the first thing that comes up. So yes, definitely check that out. Dr. Bob, how have you been? You've had your ear to the street, and we had a couple of things going on. Quite a few things going on with the dealing with the controller's office and possible state takeover of the controller's office, and a special meeting that they had that here Senators Biaggi and Bailey and Assemblyman Pretlow was at. Every council person, the mayor, every council person but Lisa Copeland, the mayor, and everybody else. I think they had a special meeting. So I know there was also a LOHUD article that you shared on your Facebook page, if you wanted to speak a little bit about that and inform everybody on what's going on.
So yeah, there are two big developments in Westchester, in Mount Vernon specifically, that I think we need to at least mention to our viewers. An important one, though less significant in the relative scheme of things, is the report that appeared in LOHUD earlier this week regarding vaccination rates in Westchester County in the city of Mount Vernon. And although we, in covering the COVID epidemic, we certainly have expressed a lot of empathy to people who are hesitant to get vaccinated. I mean, at least me and you personally, AJ, think the benefits outweigh the risks. And so I was a little surprised to find out just how many people in the city of Mount Vernon apparently disagree with us. According to figures from New York State that LOHUD ran in an article that appeared on earlier this week on June 3rd, the city of Mount Vernon only has about 26% of people in the 10550 zip code in Mount Vernon, I think, which is mainly Mount Vernon South Side.
Yes.
26% are fully vaccinated. So we're lagging considerably behind. And as you know, there's a nationwide conversation going on about the risk that those segments of our population that had not been vaccinated will experience as new waves take off or new strains of the COVID virus begin to circulate. And so, I'm concerned, brother. I'm concerned about the well-being of the city of Mount Vernon, our ability to recover if we don't have more people getting vaccinated. So I'd urge people to, give it some consideration, and please get vaccinated.
Let me before you go any further, I just wanted to say, so I did say again, New York City mayoral candidate, for those who are waiting, Shaun Donavon will be on at 7. So the first hour, we're basically just covering what's going on. So if any of the viewers want us to touch upon a topic, or you want to get our take on anything going on, please hit us in the comment section on any of the pages that we're streaming on, and please share this if you're watching it. Please share this on your page as well. Go ahead, Bob.
So that was one of my concerns. For any listeners who haven't read the article, who want to read it themselves, I'll just drop the link.
You see that comment?
As of May 24, 2021, according to Executive Director George Latimer, there are 648 positive cases of COVID-19 in Westchester County. Thanks, Stephanie. And I know that marks a considerable decline, and on the whole is giving people cause for optimism. I know I was very thankful to be out in public over the weekend. AJ, me and my son went out, had something to eat. You know, people were relaxing a little bit, but actually there's, based on the number of people who were wearing masks, myself and my son included, there is a lot of concern that numbers of people are perhaps, amongst us asymptomatic, maybe transmitting the virus still. So that is one concern.
So the latest update, so I'm clear, and also y'all have to forgive me. I don't have a lot of light in the room. My room is hot. I gotta have no fan or air conditioner on, so you don't hear the background noise. So I also don't have the extra lights on, so you might not be able to see me well. But so the mask restriction has been lifted. I think in New York State, or is it federal for people that are fully vaccinated? But then you're looking upon an honor system of those who are not vaccinated to wear masks, and you're probably looking at part of the population who didn't feel like they needed to wear masks when there was a mask restriction.
Right.
So I'm a little cautious as far as that's concerned. I still try, if I'm out, especially going into a store. Now, I was in Northern Virginia for the last week. I know we had to go to Home Depot. And in Home Depot, if you were fully vaccinated, you didn't have to wear your mask inside Home Depot.
Right.
But again, that you're depending on the honor system of the people that are that are, not vaccinated to be like, oh yeah, I'm not vaccinated, let me put my mask on. I don't see a lot of that happening. So, I still carry my mask with me when I go out, just as a precaution. And I'm not really shaking no hands and nothing like that. I'm like,
Right.
I don't know. Bill Maher said we might just want to do away with the whole handshaking thing altogether. He had a guest on there, and it was like, yo, you shake 700 people's hands, even when there is no, a pandemic. He said, you're going to get a cold or a flu, or you're going to get something. So, this whole shaking hands thing, I'm reevaluating that as well. So.
Well, what that means, AJ, is if Westchester County's COVID vaccination rates are in fact accurate, what it means is 2 out of every 3 people that we encounter in the city of Mount Vernon haven't even gotten their first dose, and only 1 in 4 people, or 25% of Mount Vernonites, are fully vaccinated. That means that we have good reason to be cautious, and it's unfortunate because we know that there's been a lot of controversy in recent weeks because folks seem reluctant to ditch the mask and go back to things as they were prior to the outbreak of the epidemic. And there seems to be a lot of confusion as to why. And the basic reason is, like you just said, AJ, I don't know who's opposite of me. I act in good faith. You act in good faith. Unfortunately, we know there are hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans who were quite resistant to wearing a mask and seem to be ready to fight and go to war over it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So, my advice, if it means anything, my advice is, carry your mask, wear it when you're around other people. I'm going to just go into this whole thing expecting everybody I come in contact not to be vaccinated. So I'm just gonna go into things that way. You know what I'm saying? And I'm gonna act accordingly. There's still, skepticism about getting the vaccination. Um, I understand that. I was definitely among those people. I still have questions on the vaccination and everything. But yo, you know, we'll see. We'll see the real test now that everything is opened up. And I think Nas Duncan was just saying they're lifting the mask restrictions for schools now. I don't know.
Well,
I don't know if that's New York, Mount Vernon, Westchester, or what. But she definitely was alarmed and made a comment about the mask restrictions being lifted for the school system.
I must confess, I'm unaware of what the regulations for K through 12 in New York State will be, but at the public universities in New York State, both CUNY and SUNY, it is mandatory that all students who return for in-person classes be vaccinated. Which would be consistent with the policy that was in place before the pandemic. And so I think people have a lot of tough choices ahead of them. In the upcoming fall semester, 60% of classes in the city university will either be face-to-face or hybrid, where you will, periodically meet face-to-face. That means only 40% of classes are going to, in the city university, will be fully online. Well, I should say, in the city university, fully online. So that means that there is not a lot of space.
So what about the people who say, yo, you can't force me to take a vaccination, and by making it mandatory that I be vaccinated before I return to school is against their rights?
Well, I wonder, then those people obviously didn't even get a high school diploma, because that is required. Currently, you are required to be vaccinated against certain transmissible diseases. And that's the MMR, mumps, measles, rubella. Everyone must be vaccinated. So it's not like suddenly mandatory vaccinations became a violation of people's rights. I'm going to be honest, AJ. I can't tell you how disappointing the level of discourse is amongst Americans just about what our notion of freedom. Everyone seems to be operating with the notion that you have absolute freedom to do whatever the hell you like. That's not true in the United States of America. Freedom is not absolute, it is constrained.
Freedom is not free, too.
That's right.
You are free to do what you want to do, but understand there were consequences and repercussions to certain things. I mean, that's the bottom line.
And in a liberal democratic society, the freedom of the individual stops at doing harm to me. You're free to do whatever you want so long as you don't harm me. But once your behavior does damage to me, either materially, financially, physically, or even psychologically, in many instances, that's where your freedom ends. I am free to be protected from your unwarranted assaults on me. And that's what I think people fail to realize. It's why you have to wear a seatbelt, right? Because if you don't wear a seatbelt, if you get into an accident, you can do immediate damage to other people because you're not strapped in. You could totally lose control of the vehicle. More importantly, there's a societal cost for accidents that everyone must bear. Right? When a person's in an accident, they get hauled off to the hospital for emergency treatment. That's provided in part, at least, through taxpayer funds. Emergency service workers who are responding, to police officers, firefighters, maybe our EMT. Those are all services that are partly provided through public funds, and therefore you just can't do anything you want, right? making use of the public good and public space means you share it with other people. People seem to think like I go outside and I own the streets. You don't own the streets. You can't just stay and do any old thing you want to. And so, I think people really need to give more consideration to the notion of freedom.
I want to change the tone a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I started with that. I literally just came off vacation. I have to say that I was disappointed. A large part of the time I was away, I was receiving calls about dysfunctional shit going on in Mount Vernon. I went on vacation to get away from this shit.
Right.
And I was still receiving calls. And we're not talking about earth-shattering things. We're talking about whether it's a misunderstanding or not. One organization, Save Mount Vernon, had a candidate forum, and one of the candidates who's a board member may or may not insinuated that the equipment may have been the libraries and not the individual that was using it. And while I do believe that it can be eradicated if everybody talks to each other, I think it is just like people have drawn battle lines on this situation. Like, I don't think everything deserves battle lines being drawn.
Right.
Then we have a situation where we have a forum going on and a candidate was asked to remove themselves from the forum because, it wouldn't be fair to the other candidates for the one candidate to have to be on the forum, and early voting would have started 2 days before that, and the way things are and people not really looking into who the candidates are, they would remember a candidate they just saw speak a day or two ago at a forum like that when they went to cast their early voting a day or two afterwards. This has turned into war where battle lines have been drawn. And these are just two of the many situations of the calls that I got. I'm not saying no names. Everybody involved, you can read about all of this stuff on Facebook. I mean, everybody is posting their opinions. I'm just saying, to my people in Mount Vernon, and I'm saying this right now. I mean, I know a lot of people may not be watching right now, and once a few people hear this, they're gonna tell other people to watch it. So, we have to work together. We're in a dire situation. Everything is dire. Like we're in a state. We just short of a state of emergency. I'm just keeping it real. Like in the last year, the state was going to come take over the library board because they couldn't vote on a fifth member. We're talking about the state coming in, taking over the controller's office for upwards of 30 years. We got candidates, rightfully so. Derrick Lawrence served on the charter revision board and feels like a vote that was made goes against the charter, and he's going to court to put a stop to it, and the judges so far agreed with him so far. But that, like, everything in Mount Vernon right now is just like, we have to pick and choose battles that are worth fighting for. I see everybody fighting just for the sake of fighting, but not fighting for anything. Like, we're too busy fighting against something to fight for anything. And in the city, that's one of the problems we have to get away from. We've been voting against someone as opposed to for someone. 2015, Ernie had to go. It was voting against him. 2019, Rich had to go. It was or Andre had to go. Whoever voting against him. 20, whatever it was, Maureen had to go. Was voting against her. Now Deborah got to go. We got to stop just voting against people and start voting for people. And that takes us to actually look into these candidates and do our part. Politics is a participatory sport. It means we have to participate. We have to stop voting, going to sleep for 4 years and then waking up and voting again and wonder why nothing has changed. If we can't get it together on simple things, and the things I mentioned, those were relatively simple, where, I mean, characters are being assassinated, lives are being threatened to be destroyed. I mean, like, yo, it's like real war, like war, like for real, like all the calls that I got and the post that was sent to me. We got to stop fighting each other and fight for whatever it is that we're trying to get done. I'm not saying we got to see eye to eye. I don't see eye to eye with more than half, maybe 3/4 of the people in the city. Don't see eye to eye with me. But I can still have a conversation with them.
Right.
We're making permanent enemies over temporary situations. That will, especially during this silly season time, on June 23rd, you're going to have to keep seeing these people at Home Depot and at the supermarket and at the post office and everything else. You got to live amongst these people still. We're making permanent enemies over temporary situations. And the next election cycle, y'all might even be for the same candidate. You know what I'm saying? But we're going to war for nothing. And we're not fighting the things we need to fight. That's it. That's just, I'm not getting off my soapbox, but I just felt I need to say that because of all of the calls that I've gotten. Specifically, this goes for the Black community, period, but specifically for Mount Vernon. There's a little bit of this going on in Greenburgh and Peekskill and other places too, but I'm speaking specifically Mount Vernon because my phone and text messages and everything blew up on everything while I was gone in Mount Vernon. And we're not talking about scandals. We're not talking political scandals. We're not really even talking about crimes. We're talking about somebody's feelings was hurt. And we're going to war. And I'm just saying, hey, yo, we keep fighting each other. Nothing's ever going to get done. Nothing's ever going to change. All them people who say it can't change in Mount Vernon, or it's never going to change in Mount Vernon, you're proving them right.
Right.
We got. I said during the senseless violence joints we were doing, you can't expect the kids to stop gang banging in the street when our adults is gang banging in City Hall. Political gang banging, political decapitation, out to destroy each other. Why? Because I supported somebody and you supported somebody else? Or because I don't like the way you said something to me this day? Or I like this person more than I like that person? Like, yo, keep it real. Like, yo, I'm tired of the bullshit. Like, real talk. And until y'all step up, all of y'all that got something to complain about and do something about what's wrong, you the problem too. I just had to. I just came on vacation, like I said, hours ago, and I had to deal with this even on vacation. And I'm just saying, I just came back to a shitstorm, and now I'm trying to put out fires and reconnect people and mediate between conversations with people. And I mean, we're not talking about nothing vital. We're not talking about the end of democracy. We got mad stuff going on, real stuff going on, and we're not talking about none of those things. We're talking about petty differences and people's feelings getting hurt, and people not liking how someone says something to somebody. And you sprinkle silly season in with that, and everything is blown up to the 10th power. And everybody who ain't got nothing to do with it, y'all act out these conversations on Facebook, and all the haters come in and they throw haterade on top of all the conversation to gasoline on the fire and make everything bigger than it's supposed to be. Bob.
Yeah. Unfortunately, AJ, I too was aware of the contention and conflict that you referred to. And I was equally disappointed, I have to say. Number one, and I want everyone to hear me clearly, Mount Vernon is unique insofar it is a Black majority city that has a significant number of non-Black populations. This is important because it really does pose a test for African Americans in particular as to how to properly manage a city, and lots of developments taking place that have undermined people's faith in our ability to manage the city. But in addition, also how to create workable political relationships across racial and class lines that work to the genuine interests of all groups. So this is part of the backdrop for some of these incidences that have generated so much controversy. And the reason I say it, AJ, is because while I'm in full agreement, we've talked about it, and I've said for years that I do think it's important for us to try to forge a multiracial, multi-ethnic working alliance that is genuinely advances the economic political interests of the vast majority of Mount Vernonites. We cannot do it at the cost of papering over real violations of expectations that folks have for dignity and respect. And I am not going to mention any names either, but I will say this much, and I hope everyone hears me. If ever, and every Black person that I know, if you are asked by someone who you're not really good with, like one of your intimates, one of your people, do you own that thing that is in your possession? That is a tacit accusation that, in fact, that person was not authorized to be in possession of that material. AJ, you my man, I know you would be offended if such a question was put to you. You know me, I would be offended if such a question was put to me. I don't know anyone who would not be offended by a question that casts doubt onto whether or not they actually legitimately own what they own. In other words, you're being accused of stealing something. And I mention this explicitly in those terms, and I know it may not have been intended that way, AJ, but we do interpretation. Whenever we get messages, we're interpreting those things. And we interpret them based on our personal and collective experience. As should be clear to everyone today, the collective and personal experiences of African Americans in this society is too often our integrity has been called into question without warrant by our fellow Americans. So I want to be very clear. The question should have never been asked, and it was. I have a good idea how it was asked. But even when it was asked, an answer was given, and that answer should have sufficed absent any kind of positive evidence to the that one's suspicions were correct.
It shouldn't have been necessary for evidence to be provided. I do want to say one thing before you continue. So for anybody who's watching this that's not from Mount Vernon, who has not been following on Facebook, usually they watch us to say names and call out certain situations.
Right.
I'm specifically not doing that because I'm working behind the scenes with all of the individuals involved to try to put to try to come to some resolution before this blows the fuck up into some shit that it don't need to be. So I'm using my platform. While I did express outrage right now and frustration, and Bob is expressing his frustration, I don't want people to think we're dancing around and we're giving people a pass by not saying their name. I am going to take, before I do an editorial, before I blast anybody on the show, I have literally reached out to everybody involved, and I'm actually trying to bring everybody together to put some kind of resolution. Now, if it don't happen, you will have way more than you want to know about it because I will spell everything out in the editorial and I will talk about it on the show. But I'm trying this approach this time since I do have I don't know if the respect of everyone involved. I don't know if that's the right word, but I got everybody's ear. And everybody is letting me know how they feel. So, you know what I'm saying? So I'm taking the opportunity to kind of bridge the gap a little bit. Shout out to Nas Duncan, who said, "You can gladly say my name." So yes, she would be one of the parties involved that I've been talking to. But you know, I would like to just, I'm going to try this approach. I'm gonna try to, while I'm talking to people behind the scenes on this one, because again, this is not something serious. This is not. We're not talking about police corruption, governmental corruption. We're not talking about money being stolen from the city. We're not talking about miseducation and the school systematic racism. We're not talking about nothing earthly, earth-shattering. You understand what I'm saying? So I really don't feel the need to even elevate it any further than that. But I am working behind the scenes because all the people involved are people that are involved behind the scenes in a lot of the movement of the things that we're doing on one level or another. You understand what I'm saying? And I really do believe, and I'm going to say this, and everybody can check this out, and I'm going to try to edit this part and play, share it on social media. From talking to everybody, and this is not even in this situation, even on the political spectrum and a lot of the other controversies going on, I really, truly feel that a good number of the people, there's some people that just throw shit against the wall just to see if it'll stick. We know the names of those. We don't even have to bring their names up. They just want to cause issues where there's no issues, and we have those. But taking that out, that they're minority. The majority of the people, the betterment of Mount Vernon is a priority to them. It's just that they all have a different opinion and aspect on how it should be done. You understand? A different approach, a different way. And just because your way is not my way, one does not make you right or wrong. It doesn't make me right or wrong. And Bob can speak to this part on a historical level. In every great movement, it was the collaborations of ideas from people who thought differently and had different approaches to shit that moved every great movement that we've ever had as a people. Am I right about that, Bob? Is that right?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, AJ. And I think we have to. I've been heartened by.
Oh well, let me just answer. Nas said it has gone too far. No, the race card has been played. Please, yeah, Nas, I know, and again, I'm not, because and you've already been told that I'm trying to get the people together. So, and I understand that. I still think though, and I still stand by this. I talked to both of the individuals who we're talking about, and the biggest issue is, and this is with most situations, they both have expressed to me and everybody else how they feel. They have not expressed it to each other. And they both need to hear how the other one feels. Now, if they just have a, excuse my language, a fuck you conversation and don't speak from that point, then they don't speak from that point. But you know what I'm saying? I've heard from both sides, and I've heard passionately from both sides. More than I'm going to say right now, that both sides, what they told me, I know for a fact the other one has never heard from them because they're not talking. All the people involved keep saying, well, she didn't call me, and they say they didn't call me, and they all each have each other's phone number. Ain't nobody called nobody. And we're blowing up a situation. This is like I said, it's not, this is a very minor situation that could blow up the city. Like literally, split people, divided forever. Forever, ever. And it's not that serious. Save Mount Vernon, just a fact. Yes. Shout out to Save Mount Vernon since Nas invoked their name. Yes, they are one of the groups involved. Shout out to everybody involved. I'm going to leave it there because, again, I am taking the approach that I want to while everybody wants to reach out to me, I'm taking the opportunity to sit there and I do agree, Nas. I don't disagree with anything you said. Trust me, we're on the same page. But I've also heard everybody else. You know what I'm saying? And at this point, I do know. I don't even know. And I said this last night to both people. I talked to last night. I don't know if the conversation will make any difference, but I do know that the two have never heard how the other one feels, and the two feel hurt by the other one, and the other one does not know why. So I will bring at least those two people together, and we'll go from there. So yeah, I want to end by what I was saying before, Bob. Just because I don't, and this is bigger than this situation here. This is for politics. This is for everything going on in our city. This is for everything going on in the Black community. Just because me and Bob and Damon, the three of us, have like three ways of looking at things. We have some heated conversations. One might want to do it this way. One might want to do it this way. One like say both of y'all are full of shit, But I mean, but we Black West doesn't exist because we respect the ideas of everybody, and it's a combination of thoughts. It's not just how one person feels. Not one person is right. Not one person is wrong. You know what I'm saying? Not one person is right all the time. Not one person is wrong all the time. And I'm talking about our movements. And again, I wanted Bob to speak more to that. Every movement was from a collective of ideas from people who saw things differently, even within our community. We're not talking about outsiders. You know what I'm saying? We got the radical, want to go back to Africa and blow everything up people. You know what I'm saying? We got the, you ain't black enough and you're too black, too strong. Then we got the, y'all just making it worse for the rest of us type people. Everybody, but everybody's voice is what helped those movements. There's people talking about Luther King. You're going to have to stop with all that noise. You're making it worse for the rest of us. I'm talking pastors. You understand what I'm saying? Had he listened to them, we wouldn't be where we are right now. So we have to be able to respect other people's opinions and frame of mind and their shared experience, and be able to come to a table and listen to everybody. Now we all make a decision on what's best after listening to everybody, and we hear from everybody, and that's how we move forward. But what's going on right now? Let's put it this way. What y'all been doing, how's that going for you? How's that working out for you? If that ain't working out for you, let's try something else. That's all I'm saying. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And I don't care who's in office. I don't care who you voted for. I don't care whatever. We still expect the same. We trying the same thing over and over. Maybe it's time to try something different. Dr. Bob.
I will simply reinforce what you said by noting that we need to resist a slide into factionalism. And people need to be firm about the principles that they're defending and balance those against, see how those balance relative to, I think, a principle that everyone should share, and that is effective collective unity based on mutual respect. So I hope we can, those parties that have been involved in this brouhaha, I hope find a way to communicate open and honestly, try their best to make amends, and then move forward for the sake of the city.
And amends is definitely necessary. I mean, there's some amends necessary. So
right.
Right. We've had that conversation, but some apologies, some public apologies might be necessary too. But
and let me say, AJ, that part of exercising real leadership is being able to say,
I was wrong. I made a mistake.
Wrong.
My bad.
Bad. Being able to say my bad, something will go a long way, especially when it's more at stake than you and your own individual interests. There is something big at stake here for the city of Mount Vernon. So I've had time to think about it, AJ. I'm not going to take up all our time by hashing over all the principles, but I think that there are some real principles at stake here, and I hope everyone will find a way to respect the principles and move forward.
Now, I know. I took this out of the trajectory. That's the word I'm looking for. Where we were heading. I wanted you to talk about. You were going to address what's going on with the controller's office, and I know we got at least 15 minutes before our guest comes on. So I wanted to give you the time to speak that. You cannot be a leader without unity in your community. Absolutely, Stephanie. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah. So I just shared. Everyone is well aware of the recent reports in Low HUD and some of the other local outlets of the proposal to implement a financial control board in the city of Mount Vernon in order to get a hold over the city's finances. We are all aware that for reasons that are not exactly clear to us, the comptroller has, let me speak frankly, done a terrible job. That's my assessment, a terrible job, and has been delinquent at this point with respect to her duties. So the city does find itself in a real financial crisis. Having said that, I was astounded to see reports that the city of Mount Vernon was actually seriously considering having a financial control board come and take over the city's finances, because at least the most notorious cases that we know of financial control boards have generally have not turned out uniformly well for all of the residents. I posted some comments on Facebook earlier this week when I heard the news that cited the example of the city of Flint, Michigan, where everyone knows there was massive lead poisoning, and the root cause was a decision to place the city in under the control of a financial control board. And in order to balance the budget, they decided to go with a new water treatment agency that botched the job and led to the poisoning of their water. So there's been a very mixed record at best of financial control boards. And I actually shared the link, and because I started to read the legislation, I was surprised to learn that, amongst other things, as you already noted, AJ, it's calling for is upwards of 30 years of control.
Yeah, I even heard about that from my pastor this morning as I went to go get communion. His concerns about that.
As I looked at the legislation, there were other provisions that I found rather concerning. One that I found concerning, and this may be standard language for this kind of legislation, but the language really would, I think, totally redraw the lines of political authority in the city of Mount Vernon in ways, in fact, that raise very troubling separation of power questions, to take it back to deep constitutional principles. Specifically, provisions that I saw that I found disturbing were, number one, one provision which would give the Financial Control Board the authority to invest the city's sinking fund in whatever vehicles it deemed financially viable. We don't know how much money is in the sinking fund of the city right now, right? The reserve fund, the rainy day fund, but it could be upwards of several $1 million. And it seems, and it gives the Financial Control Board almost unchecked authority to do with the money in the sinking fund, which it will. I'm not particularly worried. As a practical matter, I would imagine that they'd invest it in viable financial investments, but that level of control is eye-opening. In addition to that,
can I just say, most of those times when they find things to cut, there are things and services that we vitally need that they don't feel we need to be spending money on. So you might want, the people that were listening to all of this might want to consider that there are services that those would be the first things to be cut.
Right, as a general matter.
Of the fat. Yeah, so go ahead.
Right, like you said, AJ, you caught it, the trimming of the fat. we're the fat. Social services are the fat that financial control boards generally seek to get rid of first. And the way this legislation is written, it gives them almost unchecked powers on this. Another provision of the proposed legislation would allow the Financial Control Board to impose essentially a financial plan if it deemed unacceptable the financial the budgets that are proposed by the representatives of the city proper. So that's, and it's a very short time span. I think it's about 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. Another provision, which I find disturbing, is that this proposed legislation explicitly names the mayor as the city official who prepares the budget that is going to be forwarded to the Financial Control Board for consideration. Now, I must confess, everyone, Mount Vernon budgetary process is so Byzantine, so complex that I don't always fully understand it. But my sense is that as it now stands, there is input in the formulation of the budget, both from the city council, the mayor's office, the controller, and the board of estimate. The provisions of the language, the provisions of the legislation as currently written would effectively undo that. There is no mention of the role of either the city council or the board of estimate in the preparation of the budget that is going to be submitted to this Financial Control Board, and that is unacceptable. I want to say very clearly, everyone, the nub of the issue is that this Financial Control Board would effectively cede democratic control over the city and over the city's budgetary priorities to foreign interests. One provision, and the provision, and it allows bondholders some sort of say, a formal say in the actual approval of the budget. And finally, everyone, this Financial Control Board would consist of 9 board members, 7 of which would be appointed by the governor. Let me say this.
Time out. So Sandy Barnaby wanted to know what city. We're talking about the city of Mount Vernon. Bob, reshare the link again so she can read it and the Low HUD story. And thank you, Stephanie. Yes, the city of Mount Vernon. Go ahead, Bob.
And I was just going to say, finally, the governor has refused to respond to the pleas of the residents of Mount Vernon that we've been raising at least for 4 or 5 years since the last administration, when we became increasingly concerned about mismanagement. The governor refused to intervene in city affairs when we had a dispute over who was the rightful mayor, even though people have followed that up with a call for the removal of the controller, which is certainly within the governor's authority, has refused to do that. So why should we empower the governor to essentially use the nuclear option and blow up all democratic controls over the city of Mount Vernon when he has refused to exercise his power to take some of the less severe steps? Right?
So Bob's being very nice. The governor has failed the city of Mount Vernon in every form of police corruption and governmental corruption that his office was asked to speak up, to step in on, including then when the calls were for him to remove Mayor Richard Thomas when he was on trial. And I even think there was calls from other adversaries to remove Ernie Davis, and it was calls to remove Maureen Walker as controller and Deborah Reynolds as controller. And there was calls for them to do something about the Mount Vernon Police Department and so many other things. The government has not lifted a finger to do anything for the city of Mount Vernon other than to come here and get his votes. Okay, go ahead, Bob. I just want to say Cuomo ain't doing shit for Mount Vernon. I'm sorry.
Exactly. I was trying to be nice. You're right, AJ. The man ain't done shit. He's ignored every single plea, has fallen on deaf ears. He has demonstrated benign neglect when it comes to he's adopted a policy of benign neglect when it comes to the city of Mount Vernon. So it's too little too late, in my judgment, for suddenly now for him to get all of this plenary power over the city of Mount Vernon.
It could be by plan. I'm sorry. That just hit me when you said that. Since he has not come and he's been watching, and for those who don't know, Governor Cuomo is a resident of the county of Westchester. He gets News 12. He knows what's going on here. He can't say he doesn't. But to allow the stuff to keep going on and to get worse, to, like you said, pull this nuclear option, that may have been a strategic plan all along. We have to start asking that question.
We have to, AJ, and we've often wondered and scratched our heads, in our personal conversations about why everyone is moving so slow. And yes,
that includes the AG's office, that includes the state controller's office, that includes the everybody else who has been called on state and federal levels to come here and do something that needed to be done in the city of Mount Vernon, where the police department and City Hall has been concerned.
And this proposal comes at a time when major development efforts are ready to be launched in the city of Mount Vernon. Let me say this, and I want to be very clear. One of the reasons why the people across the United States have lost faith in their elected officials is because they have too cozy a relationship with their big financiers. During the campaign, I tried to act with some restraint and not take people to task too much, because I did have someone I was supporting. And so I thought that was, the proper thing to do. But I was troubled by Mayor Shaun Patterson Howard's relationship with her biggest financier, Michael Jeweler guy. And, it caused me to look very closely at campaign contributions, and his name was once again mentioned this week in relationship to another story about the Mount Vernon West development, and it noted that Michael, whoever, the jeweler, gave nearly $25,000 to Mayor Patterson Howard's campaign office, which is pretty considerable for this story.
I'm going to ask you to give last thoughts on that, as our guest for the evening has shown up, and I want to definitely give him his time so we can move forward. So, wrap up whatever you want to say. And we're gonna continue this conversation. Also, check us out tomorrow on WVOX for the Black Westchester Powwow between 11 a.m. and 12 noon. We'll probably continue this conversation there. Go ahead.
Yeah, there are a couple of meetings tomorrow, city council meetings tomorrow at 7 p.m. and Tuesday. I'd urge residents to sign up on the speakers list, review the articles that are available, take a look at the legislation, and sign up for the speakers list and express any concerns or your views on this, whether it be in support or opposition. That's all I have to say.
Again, check us out tomorrow. You are tuned into Black Westchester, People Before Politics. We're on 6 to 8 every Sunday. Matter of fact, I got a little clip that says a little better than that. Let me play my clip, and then we're going to go into the next. You are now tuned into the People Before Politics radio show, brought to you by the good folks at
Black Westchester. Black Westchester. Black Westchester. Black Westchester. Check the newspaper. Black Westchester. Black Westchester. Black Westchester. Check the newspaper.
Real talk for the community since 2014. I keep forgetting we got that promo. I'm supposed to play that every week. I keep forgetting about that. So without further ado, as we said, as part of the journalism fellowship that I received from the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at CUNY, I was covering the New York City race, and I've handed in a couple of the articles already based on the ranked choice voting and the Bronx borough president race. As part of the fellowship, we got to a lot of I guess candidate forums. We got to sit in on the candidate forums collectively as community media, and all of the candidates all said, the school said we're going to give our contact to all of the candidates, campaign managers, and everything like that. And the first person who, even before he was off the screen, his teammate Jeremy was like, "Oh, give me your address." And before we was off the forum, I started receiving emails from our next guest, who has been definitely making sure I was well informed on everything he's doing. Our guest of the evening is New York City mayoral candidate Shaun Donavon. Welcome to the show, sir.
AJ, great to be on. I'm really excited. I have been keeping in touch with you, and I'm glad to be joining you tonight.
Yes. And shout out to the whole CCM and the whole fellowship and that is doing their best to further community media, which made it possible for us to have a forum with y'all. And you're the second interview we're doing from the race. So we interviewed Eric Adams a while back, trying to see if we can get Maya Wiley soon too. But one of the things that I wanted you to, because I couldn't remember exactly all the details. You worked with the Obama administration. I'm sure that's something that my audience would love to hear about. So what did you do? And I know you were part of that administration.
Well, I was proud to be in President Obama's cabinet all 8 years. I was his housing secretary for the first 5.5 years. And then I was his budget director over the $4 trillion federal budget the last 2.5 years. And, it taught me something about leading through moments of crisis like we're facing right now. You remember this, AJ. When I became housing secretary, we were suffering through the worst housing crisis of our lifetimes. Half of Black wealth in this country had been stolen by predatory lending. And President Obama asked me to come in, keep people in their homes, and rebuild that wealth, rebuild our economy. And that was how I got started. As if that wasn't enough, when Hurricane Sandy hit New York, he asked me to lead the entire recovery. And then I guess because no good deed goes unpunished, he asked me to be the budget director when we were facing the worst budget deficit since World War II. And think about this, just 3 weeks after I started as budget director, Ebola hit, and then later Zika. I ended up working side by side with Dr. Fauci in the Situation Room with President Obama, with then Vice President Biden, making sure those global health threats didn't become pandemics that would have cost 30,000 New Yorkers their lives. So I know something about leading through crisis, and that's what we need at City Hall right now in New York.
So I wanted to get that out the way, but let me go backwards a little bit. So tell everybody who you are, why you're running, and why they should vote for you.
Absolutely. So, AJ, I'm a lifelong New Yorker. I'm actually the son of an immigrant who grew up in Costa Rica and Lima, Peru. And the reason I became a public servant is because when I was growing up in New York, I watched homelessness exploding on the streets. I watched the South Bronx, Central Brooklyn literally burning to the ground. And that was what lit a fire in me to go to work on behalf of the city that I love, that I owe everything to. And so think about this. When I was a student, I read about a remarkable leader named Bishop Johnny Ray Youngblood, who was working with the East Brooklyn congregations, South Bronx churches to build 5,000 Nehemiah homes out of the rubble, literally, of the South Bronx and Central Brooklyn. And I was so moved by his work. I came to him and I said, "Put me to work, Reverend." And he did. And I started working for a nonprofit in the Bronx, rebuilding those same neighborhoods I'd seen burning as a kid. So I have national experience and citywide experience, but I also have experience that started on the ground, rebuilding Black and brown communities in this city, building wealth through the Nehemiah homes. And that's how I got started. And so for me, what we need at this moment to be mayor is three things. We need someone who has a bold vision for how to make New York a more equitable city. We need someone who has the experience to actually make that vision real in the everyday lives of New Yorkers. And we need a change from the last 8 years of political status quo. Other candidates have had their chance these last 8 years to make real progress on equity. And we need somebody who's going to take the city in a new and better direction. That's what I'm ready to do as mayor, and that's why I'm running.
Bob.
So welcome, Mr. Donavon. It's a pleasure to have you on air.
So real quick, so yes, you know me, AJ Woodson, my partner Damon K. Jones. We started this together. We have two co-hosts, Dr. Bob, and shout out to Lorraine Lopez. Damon and Lorraine are not here today, so I definitely wanted to make sure I give them their shout outs. Go ahead, Bob.
Yes. So it's a pleasure to have someone with such a wealth of experience on the show. You know, I must say that given your extensive experience, no one could ever accuse you of not having the technocratic chops that are required to make one of the world's largest economies, you know, municipalities function properly. I included in the chat bar a link to your nearly 200-page plan. So there's a lot of details here. Obviously, we can't wade through all of them right now, but I was curious. I see that you have high up on your list of policy objectives, policies that are going to promote greater racial equity in the city. And I'm curious to know, you know, exactly what are some of the details of that proposal, because if anything, the COVID epidemic has made it very obvious to everyone that these are very deep, entrenched inequities, and that we're going to have to do something to mitigate them if we, you know, are going to have some resilience as a society.
Yeah. Well, Bob, let me just start off by saying you're absolutely right that COVID has exposed those inequities, but the truth is that those who are most vulnerable before a crisis hits are always hurt the worst by it, right? Katrina, Sandy, the mortgage crisis. And so I'm outraged by what we've seen with COVID, but I'm not surprised. And the other thing I would say, Bob, is, you know, this work is part of me. Literally 30 years ago this week, I sat down and had dinner with John Lewis, and the next morning set off to retrace the route of the Freedom Rides on the 30th anniversary. Right now, literally as we're talking tonight, is the 60th anniversary of the Freedom Rides from Washington, D.C. through the South. And so this work on racial equity is part of me. It's something I've been doing for my entire career. It's one of the reasons I went into housing to begin with. And it is absolutely, you're absolutely right. It's at the core of the work that I want to do as mayor. And here's the thing, Bob. You can predict the life chances of a child, even their life expectancy, by the zip code they grow up in. And that is wrong. We have to end that in the city. And while equity is a part of every one of my policies, here are three key things that I would do as mayor. First, I would make sure your zip code doesn't determine your destiny. And I would do that through what I call 15-minute neighborhoods. So what's a 15-minute neighborhood? I would change the way we plan and invest in our city so that every person in New York has within 15 minutes of their front door everything they need for opportunity. Great school for your kids, a job that sustains your family, housing you can afford. But also look at COVID. We need to have healthcare facilities in every single community. We need all of the things that will make sure you're not disproportionately likely to catch COVID or to die from it. Fresh food, a park, get rid of environmental pollution. All of those things have to be part of how we plan every single community for 15-minute neighborhoods. So that's one. Second, you all know that the wealth gap is one of the most important drivers of inequality and racial inequality specifically. The average Black family has 1/10 the wealth of the average white family. And so how do we change that? It's called equity bonds. Every child born in the city gets $1,000. And by the way, big shout out to Cory Booker here. I worked with him on this proposal with Derek Hamilton in New York, who originated the idea of baby bonds. This is building on that. Every child born in the city, $1,000 in an account. Every year until they graduate high school, up to $2,000 more, depending on their income. That means a child born into poverty in New York City graduates high school with almost $50,000 in an account to go to college, to buy a home, to start a business. that would fundamentally change the game in New York in terms of racial equity. And then the last thing, I would appoint the city's first ever chief equity officer reporting directly to me, because every issue is an issue of equity. And that chief equity officer would have authority over every one of the agencies. First time we'd ever have that in New York City, to really make sure that we're living up to the promises that I'm making around racial equity. So those are three key things that I would do to make sure, not just that we repair and rebuild the city, but that we reimagine it as a city that actually works for everyone.
So let me clarify, Shaun, because I want to be sure that our audience gets the gist of the proposal. It isn't that the equity bonds are exclusively for African Americans, but rather it's a kind of means tested kind of approach based on income. So everyone's going to get at least a minimum of $1,000 a year in the form of a bond. But if you find yourself from one of the, on the lower segment of the economic ladder, you'll get more, which invariably means that African Americans are going to disproportionately benefit, because we are disproportionately on the lower end of the economic totem pole, along with others.
That's correct. And again, let's be clear about how disproportionate it is. Typical Black family, 1/10 the wealth of the typical white family. So this would fundamentally go at what I think is the most intense driver of inequality in the city. And look, this is the lesson I learned starting work on the Nehemiah homes 30 years ago. Almost all the folks who moved into those Nehemiah homes came directly out of public housing, built wealth. The Black families, brown families in Brownsville, in East New York, in the South Bronx. Today, you go back 30 years later, owning that home has fundamentally changed that couple's life, their children's life, their grandchildren's life. We talk a lot about displacement and gentrification in the city. Black and brown folks being pushed out. Home ownership and wealth building is one powerful tool to make sure that people can not only stay in New York, but actually find opportunity. And that's why I want to focus on it.
You talk about gentrification. We're facing a lot of that here in Westchester County. Possibility of that in the city of Mount Vernon, which borders the Bronx, which is where I live. I know in Greenburgh, they're redoing some the apartments, and they're relocating the seniors, and they said they will give first choice to come back. And the percentage of Section 8, the percentage they pay now of their rent with the Section 8 voucher, they will pay then. But the percentage of $900 as opposed to $1,900, I'm just making up figures, is a great big difference. So even though you're giving them first crack, you said we're not displacing them, you're outpricing them, which is the very definition of displacement. We have a lot of those topics going on right now, even here in Westchester.
AJ, not only do you have them happening right now, this has been a fight in Westchester that I took on. I don't know if you remember this. When I started as HUD secretary, Rob Astorino was proposing putting all the affordable housing, all of it, basically in one Black neighborhood in Yonkers. It was crazy. And so I did something that was very unusual. I joined a lawsuit that was being brought locally to stop him doing that. And you remember Astorino actually ran for governor on this platform, said we were engaging in social engineering. Wait a second. What history books are you reading? How did we create segregated Black neighborhoods in the first place? With social engineering, right? With redlining, with that whole history. And so what I did, this was the first step I took to really enforce what's called affirmatively furthering fair housing. And I also actually led with something, it's called disparate impact, which went all the way to the Supreme Court. It's a really foundational part of civil rights law. Basically what it says is you don't have to prove intentional discrimination for something to be illegal. And if you think about all of the ways that predatory lenders targeted Black and brown folks, the devastation that was done, disparate impact was a really important piece of how we do that. Here's the thing. President Biden was in Tulsa a few days ago. And at the center of his racial equity platform was those two things: affirmatively furthering fair housing and disparate impact. He revived the work that I did as HUD secretary and that was destroyed by President Trump. You remember last year when President Trump was running, he accused Joe Biden of destroying the suburbs. You remember that? That was my work as HUD secretary that he was talking about, to try to make sure that every American in Westchester, in New York City, across this country could live wherever they choose. That's the work that I've been leading on for my career.
Yeah, I'm glad, because even though you're running in the city, a great portion of our audience is Westchester, and I knew of the Rob Astorino situation, and I knew that you could speak to that, and that's why I definitely, and shout out to Community Voices. Heard they pushed the investigation against Astorino's illegal affordable housing agenda. They were on the forefront of that here. So shout out to all of them as well.
Love CVH. Afia Adametsa done work with on public housing, so many other things in the city. And they're real leaders in New York, in the city, across the entire state. So I'm glad you shouted them out, AJ.
Absolutely. Now, I've been watching some of the debates on candidate forums, Spectrum One, and there was a few other ones, and affordable housing and homelessness, and those are the two key things here too, are among the top of everybody's concern. I know, and I'm not sure if it was you, I know one of the candidates spoke on all of the vacant hotels and properties in the city and utilizing that to increase to combat the homelessness and affordable housing. I'm not sure if that was your agenda that you spoke on. Was it?
I have talked about that quite a bit, AJ. It's a real, President Obama used to say we cannot let a crisis go to waste. We absolutely should be looking at vacant office space, vacant hotels to convert to affordable housing, and to dramatically increase the ability of New Yorkers to stay in the city and to afford. Look, here's the thing. We've got the worst eviction crisis potentially in the history of the city on our hands. We still have 500,000 New Yorkers who are out of work, and we need somebody who really knows how to solve those issues. I worked after the Great Recession. I mentioned, when the mortgage crisis hit, I created programs that kept more than 10 million families in their homes. And we need to focus on that right now. Get rental assistance into the hands of, we need legal assistance, housing counseling to help them make sure they're not losing in housing court and being evicted. And so those are things we need to do right now, but we also need to increase the amount of affordable housing longer term. And that's something, look, one of the things that's different about me from any of the other candidates is I know how to go to Washington and get the money that we need. This is like a New Deal moment, right? I mean, we might have $5 trillion in federal assistance get passed this year. And just like Fiorello LaGuardia transformed New York because he was mayor during the original New Deal and worked with FDR, who was in the White House, to bring a huge share of that money to New York. That's what I could do at this moment. We need a mayor who really understands how to go and finally get the help we deserve from Washington. And that includes housing assistance. There's hundreds of billions of dollars that could be available for housing if you know where to look and you know how to get it done.
And in addition to the affordable housing, one of the major issues that keeps coming up, that has come up way before now, but definitely comes up in this election cycle, is NYCHA and discriminatory practices and a lot of that stuff. And I know you have a few thoughts on that.
Absolutely. Look, public housing is the most precious affordable housing resource we have in New York. Think about this. More people live in public housing in New York than live in Atlanta, Georgia. And yet we've never really had a mayor who treats public housing like the precious resource that it is. And so here's what I would do. I would put the public housing at the center of my housing plan, I would commit $2 billion a year of city capital, far more than any other candidate. And I would make sure that that was the first step in getting to $40 billion that we need to fix public housing. I think we can get more than 30 billion of that from Washington. As I said, I could unlock that better than any other candidate. But here's the other thing too, AJ. If you live in public housing, here's what happens right now. You got a leak in your shower. By the time the 15 different people who need to sign off all the way to headquarters of NYCHA right next to City Hall, by the time that happens, 6 months later, a year later, that leak has turned into asthma that's causing your kid, it turned into mold that's causing your kid asthma, right? It's broken through the ceiling downstairs and is now hurting the health and the sanity of the family downstairs. We need to fundamentally change the way we manage public housing too, so that the folks who are on site have the real authority, the knowledge, the tools to get things fixed quickly. So it's the money, but it's also the way that it's managed. It is broken right now. And look, you said earlier, Bob, I bring deep experience in how to make government actually work. And we need someone who's going to bring not just compassion, but also competence back to City Hall at this moment.
We got a couple of Westchester people. Sandy Barnaby said, I wish he could help Mount Vernon. And Stephanie Salter said, also with the Greenberg Housing Federal residents. The question that I wanted to ask, we hear all the candidates talk about these plans to do this and how much it's going to cost and these and how much they're going to dedicate to everything. And very few times do I hear them say, how are they going to pay for it? And where's the money going to come from? Which is a good concern because the other side is, always putting that we're spending too much money here and there, even though they give tax cuts to themselves. But,
Yeah, well, AJ, I think what voters in New York should ask is who's actually walked the walk, not just talk the talk, right? People forget this after 4 years of Donald Trump. But when Barack Obama became president, we faced the worst budget deficit since World War II. By the time I finished as budget director, we'd reduced that deficit faster than any time since World War II, while still making huge investments in housing, in healthcare, in jobs. So I have a track record of being able to both invest in big things that are going to make New York stronger, more equitable, but also to be able to manage the budget side so that we can afford it. Look, part of this, I said it before, we have a huge opportunity to bring new resources from DC. This is a New Deal moment, and we need a mayor who can capture that. But the other thing is, look at all the places where we're spending money with terrible results. Let me give you one very specific example. Rikers Island. Just take a guess, Bob, AJ, how much do you think we spend per person at Rikers Island right now? Just take a guess.
50,000?
A couple of $100,000?
$430,000 a year per person at Rikers.
Yeah, wait, I want to stop you real quick. We say that here in Westchester. I forgot what it costs to keep someone in Valhalla, but it costs a third of that to send them to the community college.
Right.
So I just
Sound like you just send like 50 people to community college.
That's right. And buy them a home at the same time, right? But here's the thing. The same is true of homelessness. We're spending $3 billion a year putting a giant Band-Aid on the problem with emergency shelters and hotels when we know how to solve it, right? Think about this, under Mayor de Blasio, and this is part of why violence is getting out of control in the city. The number of people sleeping on the streets and in shelter has doubled under Mayor de Blasio. The mental health epidemic we're seeing playing out on our streets, on our subways, it's a powerful change that we need a mayor who can actually solve. When I was housing commissioner in the city, we brought that number, the number of individuals sleeping on the street and shelter, down by 30%. And when I led the strategy for President Obama, we actually reduced street and family homelessness by a quarter around the country. And I got a big shout out to Michelle Obama. We ended veteran homelessness in 80 cities, not reduced it, but ended it. And we not only saved lives, we saved money because we were investing in what's called supportive housing, right? Which combines housing with the mental health, the substance abuse services that people need. That's what breaks the cycle of incarceration, of mental health challenges. It saves lives and it saves money. Those are the kinds of things that we could actually do that would make New York a city, like I said, that works for everyone.
Bob.
So I want to go back to your tenure in the Obama administration, Shaun, because as you well know, it will give us some insights. Of course, the Obama administration's response to the 2008 subprime mortgage crisis was ultimately at the decision of the president. And one of the real criticisms that he's received, and that seems to have touched off the wave of populist discontent that we're living with, was clear favoritism that was shown towards the banks in terms of the quantitative easing policy that seemed to make Wall Street repair Wall Street, but left Main Street in a state of continued disrepair. The policy, the responsibility for the policy is not yours. I'm curious to know if you advocated for alternative approaches to restore the American economy, and in particular, the kind of programs that were especially popular amongst the progressive circles in which I like to count myself, that call for putting more money directly into the hands of homeowners. They said, what was your stance on this? What did you advocate for?
So, Bob, if you look back at that history, I was one of those who really pushed early on to do more buying down of people's mortgages, reducing not just what they had to pay every month, but also what they owed on those mortgages. And in the end, we did reach more than 10 million families to help keep them in their homes. I created something called the Neighborhood Stabilization Program that invested in the communities that were hardest hit, where there were vacant homes, to fix them up, work with nonprofits. And the other thing you might remember, I led the strategy that got $50 billion from the banks as part of the mortgage settlement. I actually worked very closely with Kamala Harris when she was Attorney General at the time, and partnered with her to hold the banks accountable and get money directly to those folks. Now, I wasn't the Treasury Secretary. I wasn't the Attorney General. I did, as HUD Secretary, lead the prosecution of a number of the folks who misused loans, who targeted predatory lending. But I also made sure that we were helping folks directly get the assistance that they needed. And look, this is part of the reason that I think President Obama hired me in the first place. When I was housing commissioner in the city, I created something called the Center for New York City Neighborhoods. It was the first response by any city in the country that brought together housing counseling, legal services, and real financial assistance to keep people in their homes. Because you remember this, Bob, like the number of families, I sat at kitchen tables with families, bills building up on the kitchen table, embarrassed, shameful even to ask for help. And so what we needed to do locally, and then what I did nationally, was to get billions of dollars into legal assistance, into mortgage write-downs, and into the kind of housing counseling that help people stay in their homes. And that's what we need. A different version of that is playing out right now in New York, right? We've got an eviction crisis because we have still hundreds of thousands of people out of work. We got to get money directly to those folks and help to them as quickly as possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm moving around a little bit. I know one of the things we've been dealing with here in Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, and Yonkers lately, and I've had the last couple of shows, is senseless gun violence. And I know that you addressed an incident of a 10-year-old boy, I guess in Far Rockaway, I think it was. And I asked you to speak a little bit on that because even though I'm speaking about it as a local issue, I believe this has the potential to be one of the worst summers if we don't get a hold of this senseless gun violence in our community this year.
AJ, you are so right. absolutely tragic. A 10-year-old shot and killed by a stray bullet in the Rockaways. It just, and frankly, it is happening more and more in the city. We saw gun violence double last year in New York. And so this is absolutely something we got to get our arms around. I grew up in New York when there were 2,000 murders a year, and we can't go back there. We have to just solve not just the gun violence, but the underlying causes of violence and hopelessness in our communities as well. So look, one of the things we got to do is get the guns off the street. And you know this, we're not manufacturing guns in New York City. Folks aren't buying them legally in our stores in New York. They're coming in from rogue gun dealers out of state. And we need a mayor who has the relationships with the attorney general, with all our national law enforcement agencies, but also with mayors and governors around the region, around the country, who can build a coalition to stop the flow of guns into the city. Otherwise, we're never going to be able to really stem the causes. The other thing I would just say, I was actually just out in Brownsville today, and there are amazing organizations, the God Squad, many organizations that are working to build trust with young people in our communities to break the cycle of gang violence. We need to be investing in those kind of approaches that make a huge difference. And I'm the one candidate in the race who's got a plan to get to $3 billion of investment in those kind of efforts. Here's something I did as housing commissioner. I gave housing to folks coming out of Rikers. And I took some real criticism. Some people said, what are you doing giving housing to criminals? But here's the thing. A year later, more than 90% of those folks were stably housed. They'd gotten back to work. They hadn't committed another crime. It was so successful, it's now been replicated in almost 40 cities around the country. Those are the kinds of investments we got to reinvest in our communities to break the cycle of hopelessness and violence, as well as attacking gun violence directly and getting the guns off the street. That's what's really going to make a difference long term.
We have a couple of organizations here locally. One is SNUG, which is gun spelled backwards, and we have another organization, Save Mount Vernon. Those two are doing great work and reaching out to our community. It's definitely something we've been addressing a lot, and I've been really campaigning that. Campaign is campaign season, but I guess I've been campaigning that we need our residents. We need to get more involved, and we really need to tackle the situation, because again, we're coming upon what could be a perfect storm. You know, we have a lot of inmates who's released because of COVID or for the bail reform, and they didn't come out to stimulus checks and extended unemployment checks. And if they can't find jobs, what do you think some of them are going to do? And then, you know, some of it was peaceful for a while because everybody was inside, but now the restrictions are left, and now everybody's coming out. And, you know, we all know when the mercury rises, you know, the gun violence rises as well. So, you know, when you put all those things together, we could have a perfect storm this summer if we don't get.
Absolutely. And AJ, when you mix into that the mental health challenges we've seen, COVID, the isolation, look, Rikers is the biggest mental health facility in the country. It's crazy. And we're not treating the root causes of this violence. Here's why. I talked earlier about supportive housing. The other day I was getting off the subway in New York, and a young man named Willie Boyd walked up to me, and he told me that his dad had been a veteran, had served his country, and had fallen into a cycle of mental illness, of drug abuse. And the thing that saved his life was supportive housing. And again, what that is, it's permanent housing. It's not a shelter where, you know, open air drug markets, you know, big rooms with lots of beds where you have violence. This is individual rooms with the housing and services you need on site, right? So it's got mental health services, it's got substance abuse, and it really does end the cycle of mental health and other challenges. Right now, we're expecting people to get well while they're living on our streets or at Rikers. And the other thing we need to do is make sure that we're directing people immediately to that when they get out. Right now, they're just falling through the cracks, ending up on our streets and in shelter. And that's part of the cycle of violence and mental illness that we're seeing playing out on our streets right now.
I want to thank you for your time, of course, and I know you have a lot of other things to do. But before you go, without necessarily maybe taking shots of the other candidates, I mean, there's a whole basketball team running for mayor. Explain why you specifically are the candidate that people need to vote for. If anybody's interested in knowing more about you, find out about your campaign, how would they reach out to your campaign, all that good stuff.
Thanks, AJ. And look, I am so grateful to be on. I was really inspired by your work when we had the forum, and I've been eager to get on and spend a little time with you, get to know folks. Obviously, we got a bunch of Westchester folks. Hopefully, we got a few in the Bronx watching as well. And elsewhere. And I would love to have your first choice vote. Voting starts on June 12th. So Election Day, June 22nd, is the last day, not the first day that you should vote. So please get out. I mentioned John Lewis earlier. You know, he said the vote is precious. It is almost sacred. It's the single most powerful tool we have, nonviolent tool in a democratic society. And so I'd urge everyone, New York City resident or otherwise, to get out and vote. And look, here's why I would want to earn your support. We have a bunch of candidates who have some big, bold ideas. We have other candidates who bring experience to the table. And I'm the only candidate that actually combines those. I have the biggest, boldest ideas around equity bonds, around 15-minute neighborhoods to actually make the city more equitable. But at the same time, I've actually made progress on those issues. You can't call yourself progressive unless you've actually made progress on inequality and racial equity. And so I bring both those, and I bring real change. Again, lots of other candidates in the race, they've been part of the political status quo the last 8 years. I haven't. I'm going to bring fresh ideas and deep experience, especially in crisis, in a way that would allow me to not just repair and rebuild the city, but reimagine it as a city that works for everyone. That's me.
I have two questions that I ask candidates that have nothing to do with the campaign and just to break up the monotony. So the question number one is, if your house is on fire, you can only grab three things. What would they be?
Only three things?
Yes.
Wow. Well, one of them would be my portrait of John Lewis that hangs on my wall. You know, I would have to say that there is a picture of my son. He's a soccer player, just graduated from college. And I have a picture of him after his greatest game he ever played. I was in high school, actually. And that I treasure. I would take that with me as well. And then I'd have to take a few of my favorite albums from my record collection. Songs in the Key of Life would probably be number one on that list.
Okay.
That's get better than that.
Yes. And lastly, if you were a superhero, who would you be and why?
Well, you know, Ed Norton is supporting my campaign, so I should probably say the Incredible Hulk.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That's good. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you want everybody to know? And again, I don't know if you gave your contact information and website and stuff.
ShaunForNYC.com. ShaunForNYC.com. Go there, check it out. We'd love to have your support. Read about the campaign of ideas that we're running, all of the issues on racial equity that we've talked about tonight, but read about the ways that I've actually put those plans into action too. So love being here, AJ. Thank you, Bob, and hope to join you again soon.
And pleasure having you. Best of luck.
Definitely best of luck. And should you emerge as the winner, even though we're outside of the district, the area that you would be covering mostly, I hope you feel free to, come back and let us know your progress, what's going on, and, use us as a means to getting the word out.
I'm making you a promise tonight. When I'm mayor, I'm coming back on the show, and I look forward.
Okay.
Looking forward to it.
All right. Have a good one. Thank you for your time.
Big elbow bump to both of you.
Oh,
All right,
absolutely.
it's a pleasure, man.
All right.
Take care.
Take care. Take care. So that's our second of the mayoral candidates that are coming from New York City again, and I'm proud of it. So I keep saying it. You know, I won a fellowship this year for a journalism fellowship, and is covering the race in New York City, and they give you a bunch of resources, and you know you get to talk to a lot of the candidates, and you know you get to. So I've been trying to get some of the candidates on. We've had Eric Adams on for an hour a couple weeks ago, and now we have Shaun Donavon. I'm working on Maya Wiley. If she hears me, I'm working on Maya Wiley. You know, definitely want to. I have to. She was the first one I wanted to get, so she's the first. I'm reaching out to her and a couple other candidates too. Yeah, so we're going to be doing more of that, and I'm covering more of the Bronx because the Bronx is, of course, the closest region of New York City that's close to us. So two of the things I did was ranked choice voting, which is a good article that you should read. If you vote in the city or if you know anybody who votes in the city, you should definitely read it. It's definitely interesting, especially for a city like Mount Vernon, because the onus is if you don't get 50% of the vote in the primary, what you do is you actually pick your top 5 choices. So you pick your person that you vote for, you pick the second choice, third choice, fourth choice, fifth choice. So if the candidate doesn't get, the first choice candidate doesn't get 50%, whoever came in last place, that person gets removed from the list, and whoever their second choice vote was goes to the candidates. And then they add it up again and see if they got 50%. It goes on and on. The reason I bring this up, I think maybe 5 is a bit too much, maybe 3, but I think it's something that there's been complaints about Vernon for the last decade or so that the mayoral candidates are not getting even 40% of the overall vote in the primary. Richard Thomas won by, I believe it was 38% in the 2015 Democratic primary. And Sean Patterson Howard, I believe it was like 32 or 33%. So that is not the majority. And in this case, you know, you would vote for your first one, your second one, your third one, and then they would take the last one and they would add it up. And hopefully, you know, I think more of the people would have a say on who the mayor is. And so I think that might be, you know, something that places like Mount Vernon might want to try. So yeah, I wrote an article on that, and that you can see that on Black Westchester, and I covered the Bronx borough president race, which up to now has only been a man in that position, white men for the first 7, and then you know you had a few Hispanic men. You have a black woman running, Vanessa Gibson. She would be the first African American woman, first woman. If she wins, and then you had can't remember the other lady's name. Her last name was Fernandez. So she would be the first Latina female, Latina woman, because you have a Latino man now, Ruben Diaz Jr., a senior. So you know, so I covered that race. So I'm covering. I got 2 or 3 more stories I got to do, and this is part of my fellowship, you know, interviewing some of the mayoral candidates. Excuse me. So Stephanie Swan said candidate Shaun Donavon was so very informative. Sandy Barnaby said, congratulations, AJ, what a wonderful program. Thank you. Stephanie Swan said New York City teacher unions are now fond of this way of voting. We're going to see. When I did the story before, I think my first stories had to be in before May 29th or something, May 20th or something. The rollout wasn't enough. I did a survey of sampling of Bronx voters, and not enough people knew what it was or how it worked or had confidence in it yet. So while it's a great thing, I think they still, and I'm starting to see more. Last night, I seen a commercials on. I'm starting to see more commercials on it explaining it. I think they they need to do more of the rollout for going into the early voting. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Thank you for Shaun Donavon for allowing us to interview him, and we're going to try to get a couple more of the candidates. In the beginning, the unions were against it. Yeah, there's a lot of people that were against it, and there's a lot of people that still don't know how it's going to be. I think I'm going to do the same thing. I think I'm going to do an exit poll, my first exit poll, afterwards. Probably, again, the sample size of the Bronx, to see how people received it. Did they understand it? Was it explained to them? Do you think it'll be better? You know, and see overall how it worked out for voters in the Bronx, which is right next to us. The borough closest to me. I literally can almost throw a rock to the Bronx borderline from my house. Yeah. So Bob, any comments, quotes, anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I mean, as always, the time is too short. We really just scratched the surface.
Yeah, he had to be somewhere. He had to be somewhere at 7:45.
Right.
So
Right,
I was trying to make sure we get everything in, and I think we got a lot in, but again, an hour is not enough time ever to really get to know a candidate. Especially in a big race like this.
Right. One of the questions that was unasked by me that has a direct bearing on Westchester is the city's policy with respect to essentially the exportation of the homeless population to Westchester.
Yes, that's something that Andre Wallace.
Yeah.
Andre Wallace started that fight, and had he won, would have continued to even including suing the city for sending they send. So New York City, Mount Vernon and Yonkers, and now more Mount Vernon, have become dumping grounds for the poor and the homeless throughout Westchester. Now it seems New York City is sending up its homeless up to Mount Vernon, and they give them like rent money for 6 months to a year, but if people that had certain situations without programs, without training, when that money runs out, now you have a homeless person here who can't afford the rent here, who is struggling. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's a problem, and it oversaturates our city, which is already struggling from programs being cut and being a dumping ground. Something David and Bob have talked about extensively for the last couple of years. I would have been. There's a couple of things I wanted to get into, but I was also trying to keep it a little bit. Why Westchester people like, why I care about who's running in New York City?
Right.
Hearing his work with Obama and especially the HUD situation with Astorino. I mean, we all know about that, so that's something we can, hopefully people got. And a couple of our listeners, I know Sandy and Stephanie were looking for contact information so they could reach out with some of the things going on in Mount Vernon and Greenberg. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe even the suggestions on how to handle some of the stuff and how to address some of the things. So because of the comments he made. So yes, as we come kind of close to the close of the show, did you want to finish your thought on what we were talking about beforehand?
Yeah, I mean, this issue of.
Go ahead. I just want to, since I don't get to do this often, I want to throw this back out there one more time. You are now tuned into the People Before Politics radio show, brought to you by the good folks at
Black Westchester. Black Westchester. Black Westchester. Black Westchester. Check the newspaper. Black Westchester. Black Westchester. Black Westchester. Check the newspaper.
Real talk for the community since 2014. Yeah, so I spent all that time putting that together, and I keep forgetting to show it every week. So I just had to do it one more time. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I haven't finished reading the bill, AJ, or the proposed legislation. But even as I was pulling it back up, I happened upon another provision that should be very concerning to everyone, and that there is a provision in the legislation that would give the control board the authority to impose wage or hiring freezes. Now, this has been a very important issue because I have a number of friends, and as do you, AJ, many of our listeners who serve as municipal workers. And one of the issues that have been at the center of discussions that I've been having lately with friends who are in the municipal workforce is their job security. There's a widespread perception that because one has a municipal job, where you have a collective bargaining agreement, that your job is safe. And under normal conditions, you can look to kind of lifelong security, all things being equal. But here, already the city of Mount Vernon is being set up for some sort of massive, if not cut of jobs, then certainly a freeze on hiring at the very time when there are new programs that are going to have to come online if the city of Mount Vernon is to address the multiple crises that we're confronting. So, I think that residents of Mount Vernon need to raise their voice in vociferous opposition to this proposal. I think the elected officials in the city of Mount Vernon have an obligation to start with the least severe kind of reforms to government before they opt for the most severe one. It's a big problem that I have. I don't think this bodes well. And moreover, I have to say, AJ, I find it curious because, the city apparently has a 21 million bucks. Is getting ready to hit the, was it 27 million bucks?
Yeah, for I forgot, for education and for the infrastructure of the schools and updating our schools and something like that. Yeah.
Right. And
well, actually, it's 42. Half of the money is coming now, and half is supposed to be due in 6 months or something like that. I forgot when the other half comes, but I think it's a total of 42.
And for such a large injection of cash into the city's coffers, unless our financial condition is in total shambles, it suggests that there may be money to stave us over the worst kind of financial crisis that we have. So it seems to me, in many respects, it's somewhat premature.
Well, this is what got us into the situation, because from as I get it, the city council, I guess, along with the support of the mayor, passed legislation or passed a whatever you call it, proposal, whatever you call it when they pass, to bypass the controller's office and for the clerk's office to receive this money, and then the clerk's office to then transfer it to the water department, where the mayor and the council can get at this money without having to go through the controller as a normal form of way that the money is expended. And this is what led to the Derrickson Lawrence lawsuit and several other things, and then call for a state to come in and all these other things. This was because of the concern of this money that you're talking about. Is that if it goes straight into the controller as what we're being told, the controller not doing anything, the controller has definitely not accepted any invitations for an interview, so I have not had a chance to talk to her. I've heard everybody else's versions of it. But she's supposedly not paying things and not doing this and not doing that, and they were scared that this money would come in and it would just sit there and then they wouldn't have access to do what needs to be done with the money. But some people are concerned that this sets a precedent, since, we always hear our union people and union members always talk about past practice. We've heard that a lot from our friend of ours in his backyard. Past practice, and setting a precedent. This sets a precedent for a future mayor, it goes beyond the current administration. What if we have a future mayor whose whole intent is to rob the city? This has already been done, and money's coming in and not having to go through the controller and going through another form and going to the water department or whatever like that, and then being able to be spent as where they need to spend it. It sets a dangerous precedent. What they say is a slippery slope. And I think that's one of the things we have to be careful what we ask for as a fix to our situation. I use as an example during crack era, we demanded, and a lot of our black legislators and NAACP and our black pastors demanded the government do something, and we ended up with the crime bill and the mass incarceration of black people. You understand what I'm saying? We have to be careful that the fix is not worse than the problem. You know what I'm saying? And we have to be specific on what we want. And again, that's up to the residents and the voters. We have to inform ourselves more so we know when we speak. Like we always say, you know, we call for a no chokehold bill after Eric Garner. After George Floyd died, they passed a no chokehold bill, but George Floyd didn't die from a chokehold. So, you know what I'm saying? So what, it going to be another 8 years? We're going to get a no chokehold, no knee on the neck bill? You know what I'm saying? And they'll find another way. Whereas, as Damon says all the time, if you pass federal legislation or any officers who violate their policies, procedures, and training, and it leads to serious injury or death, and you identify that as a crime, it doesn't matter how, whatever the next incident is. You know, Eric Holder said, you know, after the Ferguson situation when he stepped in, he said the bar is too high to be able to convict in those situations. The bar is extremely too high. So I believe if we specifically know what we're asking for, we ask for this kind of legislation, that brings the bar down to where, you know what I'm saying, we can have more justice in those situations that we seek. Attorney Joe Murray, a follower of the show, said New York City Mayor and City Council need to visit the Statue of Liberty and read what was inscribed. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. I said Trump need to read that too when he was president. That's how a lot of this country, you know, the greatness of this country is people coming from all different places and their contributions. You know what I'm saying? A lot of a lot of things that we've accomplished and everything came from people who were former immigrants, who came here, got education, and, you know, became scientists or whatever they became. That's where a lot of our accomplishments come from. So yes, Joe, I do agree. I find the city interesting, the city election interesting. It's going to be like a big turn. So I don't know. I guess it was because of term limits. So out of the 50 plus council persons, 34 of those seats were up this year. Mm-hmm. 4 of them have already been passed. 4 of them were special elections. Joe, I think 1 or 2 in Queens, if Joe's still listening, and I know 1 or 2 in the Bronx. So then you have at least 30, 31 more elections, and you have upward to 10 people running for some. You have over 300 and like 320 some people running for them 31 seats. Some seats alone have over 10 people running for them. Two of the special elections in Queens, and other 2 were in the Bronx. That happened earlier, and then there's another 31 seats up. So you're gonna have 35 new council persons, a new mayor. Like, you know, there's a reason why you see in Mount Vernon we have our mayor gets elected and 2 council people, and then in what would be their midterm, which is what we're facing now, then you have the other 3. So, you know, you're having a shift. You're not starting with a clean slate. You know what I'm saying? You're having, you know, working. So it's a huge, and to my people in New York City who listen to this and who will hear this, you have to be very you have to be on your game about who you're voting for and put the right people in place, because this right now will be the future of New York City for decades. Like how whatever happens now, like this big of a turnover, you're looking at the decades of the future of the city and how it goes and what direction it goes in for a while. So you need to take that into consideration when you casting your votes and pay more attention to that. So hopefully the few interviews we do will help towards that. Bob, closing remarks. We're gonna get out of here.
Well, it's good to have you back, brother. I hope you're well rested.
Oh, I'm well rested. I'm telling you, I'm well rested. Man, listen, focused. Yeah.
Yes, and I urge everyone who was privy to our earlier discussion to ponder, some of the things that AJ and I said, so that we might be able to move forward with a sense of, shared purpose, and put those conflicts behind us that are solvable behind us, and move forward.
I want to shout out a lot of the people who tuned in. Of course, Patty Combs, who's a big follower of Black Westchester, Sandy Barnaby, who's always a big supporter, Lila Kirkton, Stephanie Swan, Marvin Church, Tamika Douglas. There are several other people. Joe Murray, of course. Everyone else who tuned in. I don't have the rest of the names. Jeff Monroe tuned in for a few. I didn't get a chance.
I didn't realize that was just.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to. Unfortunately, we're not dealing with a New Deal president. We're dealing with a senator credit card, Joe Biden. I was like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get a chance. I didn't actually get a chance to get that. So Jeff was one. There were quite a few other people. I just don't see their names right this second. But to everybody, someone whose Facebook name is Bolita, Bolita, Yemi, Yemi, who tunes in a lot. Shout out to her. Nas Duncan, of course, always holding us down. Again, if I didn't say your name, I apologize. And thank you for listening. This has been another episode of Black Westchester Presents the People Before Politics radio show, episode 302. Thank you, Stephanie. She said a great show as usual. So episode 302. We'll be back next week. Also, check us out tomorrow on WVOX 1460 AM, 11 AM to 12 noon for the Black Westchester Power Hour. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I was going to say next week we'll be devoting a considerable part of the show to a discussion of Juneteenth celebrations here in Westchester County.
Yes.
It's a real pleasure. AJ and I met a couple of organizers who are in the lead of this effort, including Wilhelmina Simone from Pelham, New York, who is spearheading the
impressive young lady. Very impressive young lady.
Yes, very impressive young lady, along with her co-producer. We're also going to have representatives from New Rochelle Council of the Arts. New Rochelle Council of the Arts, Linda Tarrant Reed, and one of her collaborators. We're going to talk about what the Juneteenth celebration in New Rochelle, that includes, I should say, everyone, a exhibition that's in the City Hall. So for those of you who are in the area, I urge you to go check it out. It features a lot of local artists, from what I understand. And then we're also going to have from Tuesday Paige McDonald from Peekskill's youth department, who's going to be talking about some of the Juneteenth programming that they're doing in that city. So we hope that, it's an opportunity for the audience to kind of just, re-engage with the question of what Juneteenth means to the nation in general and African-American Black folk in particular. So we hope you all tune in.
And if you are involved in any of the planning or putting together of any Juneteenth activities in Westchester County, please email us at blackwestchester@gmail.com so we can make sure that we highlight, any other Juneteenth celebrations throughout the county. So anybody has any Juneteenth celebrations, please send it to me so I can post it. And anybody who might also want to be on the show, maybe possibly, you can email us at blackwestchester@gmail.com. With that said, that's it, man. I'm out of here. Glad to be back. Actually, I did not want to come back. I'm keeping it real. I did not want to come back. It was too short, but I got a lot of rest, and we back at it. So
I saw you with your feet up at least one day.
Oh, several days. Several days. At the fire pit, sitting on the couch with the big thing, outside by the pool. My feet were up the whole time.
I ain't gonna tell anyone about the Heinekens and big drinks.
It was Coronas. It was Coronas.
Oh, Coronas. All right.
Coronas and Ciroc smoothies. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So I'm going back as soon as this primary is over, probably that weekend. Spend at least another week going into the 4th of July. So anyway, until next week, peace.
22 million black victims of Americanism are waking up, and they're gaining a new political consciousness, becoming politically mature. And as they develop this political maturity, they're able to see the recent trends in these political elections. Any minority that has a block of votes that stick together is in a strategic position. Either way you go, that's who gets it. You're in a position to determine who go to the White House and who stay in the doghouse. You're the one who has that power. You and I have never seen democracy. All we've seen is hypocrisy. When we open our eyes today and look around America, we see America not through the eyes of someone who has enjoyed the fruits of Americanism. We see America through the eyes of someone who has been the victim of Americanism. We don't see any American dream. We've experienced only the American nightmare. We haven't benefited from America's democracy. We've only suffered from America's hypocrisy. And the generation that's coming up now can see it and are not afraid to say it. 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 And are not afraid to say it.